just $30 each. Click, call, or visit a Spectrum store today.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
I'm Sharon Tazwell. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. The U.S. economy added over 150,000 jobs last month, according to the latest jobs report. It's the first full monthly tally under President Trump's second term. The unemployment rate rose to 4.1%. Meanwhile, new uncertainty as the president threatens Canada with new tariffs on lumber and dairy products. U.S. officials say it's all part of negotiating.
Some people said, oh, geez, it looks like, there's some disorder because you're changing the parameters, but that's what negotiations are.
The Trump administration is considering new sanctions against Russia as its war with Ukraine rages on. The president says the sanctions could target Russia's banking sector. U.S. officials are expected to meet for ceasefire talks with Ukraine next week. And Trump says he hopes Ukraine is serious about peace.
I don't know that they want to settle. If they don't want to settle, we're out of there because we want them to settle. And I'm doing it to stop death.
The deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, have been ruled natural. Officials say an autopsy found Hackman's wife died days before him from hantavirus. Hackman died of severe cardiovascular disease with advanced Alzheimer's as a significant factor. And that's a look at your Spectrum News in 90.
Welcome to The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor at Spectrum News. We launched this program last year to focus on the biggest deal there is in America, the future of our country and its people. With a new administration in the White House and a new Congress, we're exploring the new people and policies in power that are shaping the nation. The big deal this week was President Donald Trump's highly partisan address to a joint session of Congress. The president's remarks came as the administration is dealing with a number of issues, from tariffs to the war in Ukraine and federal workforce cuts. It all marked the longest speech in modern history, coming in at just under 100 minutes, where President Trump tackled everything from high egg prices to border security. And there was a very clear split in the room, with silence on the Democratic side and cheering on the Republican side. We will get to all of that and more. But first, take a look at the difference in tone during Tuesday's speech compared to Trump's State of the Union address in 2019.
We must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy, or to make them stand, or smile, or applaud. Nothing I can do.
Joining me now with more are two top political analysts. Ebeth Bruswell is an anchor for Spectrum News 13 in Orlando, Florida, and Tim Boyum is political anchor for Spectrum News 1 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ebeth, realistically, apart from the usual ceremonial recognition of Americans who have done something outstanding or heroic or overcome adversity, was there anything in the president's speech that Democrats could have applauded?
There could be a short list, but I tell you what, it seems like they didn't find the list, and there was no applause from Democrats. You had the situation where the visuals were so important, right? As we saw, 15 minutes, 20 minutes turned into a half hour, 45 minutes, almost 2-hour speech. In that almost 2-hour stretch, there was the teenager, right, survivor of brain cancer, who got a special badge because he always dreamed of being in law enforcement. Anybody should be able to clap for that. There was other special attendees in the gallery, a mom who had lost her daughter. These are moments that you stop and you pause and you go, I don't care what's next to your name, an R or a D. That should be a moment that you applaud because this family is being recognized for the hardship they've endured and how they hope to make it better in the future. When it comes to folks that I recognize among so many faces, Orlando Representative Maxwell Alejandro Frost, Generation Z, he had a shirt that says something about no kings here, and he had the signs, like the little paddle, just like other Democrats had. And here's the thing, things like, okay, the border situation, as extreme as it may seem for many Democrats, at least there's some sort of control now, which has not been the case for the last 9 months, for the last year. Even Democrats saying we need help at the border. There's a crisis. They could have stood and applaud for that. And then, of course, we saw Representative Al Green, who was removed from House chambers. That was super mega dramatic. He had the cane and the shouting. I mean, imagine if our family members behave this way, if our adult or young adult or teenage kids behave this way at, say, like a school government meeting. It would be not good.
Sure.
But here we have grown folks, acting that way.
Well, yeah, Tim, tell us about the reaction by Democrats in the chamber. That member, Al Green of Texas, he stood up, he yelled at the president, he ultimately got thrown out of the speech, which I'm sure he anticipated. What about his Democratic colleagues? What messages were they trying to send?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it shows kind of, since the election, the Democrats are sort of a disarray of where to move forward. I mean, leadership wanted Democrats to kind of stay on message, don't bring on props, and pretty much the exact opposite happened. In fact, there were some members, one North Carolina Congresswoman, one of those, that did not come to see the speech at all. They said they just could not support it and did not want to be there in person for it. Some walked out during the speech. There was also silent props that were held up, signs that were held up that, said save Medicaid, Musk steals, false, lies, one that said this is not normal. And so there was a kind of a wide variety of things, which again shows sort of why the Democrats just seem to be in disarray and not lined up. Some would argue that might be a good thing as they try to sort through where to move forward with this next. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, everyone was sort of lined up. Not everyone agrees with the way that Donald Trump seems to be doing it from the Republican side, but you can't question that they are more aligned and excited about what is happening right now. Even despite the chaos that is happening up in Washington, they wanted to see drastic changes, and boy, that's what we're seeing.
Okay, now, Beth, President Trump spent a good amount of time during that speech talking about tariffs. He's gone back and forth, though, over the week about when those tariffs or taxes on foreign goods are actually set to take effect. Originally, the White House's justification for new taxes was to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants coming from Canada and Mexico. But those countries have complied with everything they've been asked, but still Donald Trump is pushing ahead with steep tariffs. What is President Trump's endgame here, do you think?
Errol, the endgame is that he's trying to send a clear message. Everybody put on your seatbelts. As much as many folks watching tonight would like to be on the slow lane if you can, if you're on the highway, it's safe, you're going to get there at some point. President Trump is on the fast lane in a hot, brand new Ferrari. He's going full steam ahead, and he's saying, watch me go down the road and try and figure things out. I'm talking to some folks who were actually on the Trump campaign, not necessarily staff members at the White House right now, but they tell me this is how President Trump rolls. It's his version of shock and awe. I remember seeing a video just a couple days ago, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying the number one issue is the cost of gas, cars, et cetera. How do you bring that down? They're saying it's not going to go down. If these tariffs continue, it's going to raise the cost of items that Americans need, that I just mentioned.
Yeah, $3,500 to $12,000 per new car if these tariffs go through is one estimate I saw. So now, Tim, the U.S. economy added 151,000 jobs last month, according to the first jobs report under President Trump's second term. It was lower than expected and represented an increase in the unemployment rate. How are the markets reacting, and is the new Trumponomics shaking up what had been a stable economy?
Yeah, it's whiplash like every single day, every time you check it, right? The markets are all over the place. And that's a measure that Donald Trump normally uses for success. And I think that's why we're seeing sort of whiplash. He's responding back and forth with these threats on tariffs and what happens moving forward. And, you know, in my 25 years of covering politics, businesses like stability. And so that's part of the problem of what is moving forward. And I think we're starting to see companies sort of sit back and say, well, let's wait and see how this all plays out. You know, I know a lot of people, private companies that are sort of putting, you know, some moves on pause to wait and see what happens. Even nonprofits, I know, they put in sort of hiring freezes or not spending money that they absolutely have to or that aren't revenue decisions to just wait and see how this all plays out because of the concerns of not only how the market's going to move, but also, you know, revenue that they might get from state and federal governments that might be under scrutiny might be next. In North Carolina, for instance, the House Speaker today just put something out, a video out on X, about how Doge is coming to North Carolina. And so I think there's this uncertainty is difficult for businesses, and we may see this continue until or if things sort of stabilize.
Yeah, could result in a slowdown. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ebeth. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about the effect of the Trump administration's federal layoffs, specifically across America's national parks. Stay with us.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
I really am in the middle of nowhere. Every day is different. Chores, come on, homeschooling, and then I fit in the rug business. I just got a new batch of rugs that I'd love to show you. I have a website, and a lot of what I do is sharing my home life. Mommy's leaving. Reliable, high-speed internet is the foundation of our business. Spectrum was great. They went out of their way to make sure that I was okay and I was taken care of. Shoo! And that's the awesomeness of having Spectrum.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable. The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Watching The Big Deal. Federal agencies are still grappling with the Trump administration's waves of abrupt layoffs that have sparked outrage across the nation. That includes the National Park Service, where 1,000 employees were let go last month ahead of the busy spring break and summer seasons. The Park Service operates with about 20,000 employees, which includes 7,000 or so seasonal workers. Those affected by layoffs include park rangers, custodians, and wildlife researchers. Concern is growing that the cuts could harm the 433 sites of the National Park Service, which see more than 325 million visitors every year. Now, over the weekend, thousands of people came out to protest in support of the Park Service at hundreds of demonstrations from California to Maine. Spectrum News reporter Zarina Khairzada spoke with one worker who lost her job in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area.
Dozens took to the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area Visitor Center, voicing their outrage against recent federal cuts to the National Park Service that cost Katie Preston, a probationary archaeological technician here, her job.
I learned about it in an email at like 2 o'clock on a Friday. Basically just said, we've decided to terminate your position. And I was off-boarded by the end of the day.
The Saturday Protect the Parks protest was one of 433 planned across the nation after about 1,000 National Park Service workers lost their jobs. Katie says about 10% of staff here, like biologists, archaeologists, and a ranger, also lost their jobs.
A lot of them are seasonal or term positions, so people come and go pretty quickly. But all of us had terms, and we were supposed to be there for at least 4 years.
The Park Service said they will be hiring nearly 8,000 seasonal workers despite the cuts. The federal cuts came from an initiative from President Donald Trump's administration, hoping to cut down the nation's $36 trillion debt.
We're cutting down the size of government. We have to. We're bloated. We're sloppy. We have a lot of people that aren't doing their job.
The organizer of the area's protest, Chris Graves, says public lands need to be protected.
It's a first step into opening them up to robbing them from the public and to opening them up to drilling for oil, to taking it over for corporations, maybe selling off parcels to developers. And I won't stand for that.
In the meantime, Katie hopes she'll find a way back here one day.
It was heartbreaking, yeah. I love the park I work for. I love the people I work with. They're the best people I've ever met. But I'm hopeful, that one day I'll get to come back.
We move! We move! A community hoping to preserve nature and the jobs that protect it across the nation. Zarina Khairzada, Spectrum News.
Joining me now with more on the impact of these layoffs on our national parks is Beth Pratt, the California director of the National Wildlife Federation. Beth, thanks so much for joining us. And now, these layoffs, which are part of the administration's efforts to shrink the federal workforce, at what point will visitors start to notice the impact of layoffs on national parks like Yosemite?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Errol. I have to say, just watching people like Katie, who I work in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area some of the time on projects. I've worked in Yosemite National Park and live outside the park for a decade. To see the heartbreak of people like that and to hear President Trump say that these are sloppy workers who aren't productive, that is absolutely not the truth. These are dedicated public servants, often making very little money, working long hours to serve the public good and to make sure these parks are protected and that people can enjoy them. And you're already seeing the parks being impacted. You're seeing, like in Yosemite, the campground reservation system was on pause. There's not a lot of fat on the bone in parks. They were already underfunded, already grappling with how to ensure that visitor services are provided and that the parks remain protected for future generations, which should be the bottom line here.
Yeah, and of course, people are our primary concern, but how could a lack of staffing affect the wildlife, the welfare of the wildlife in those national parks?
Exactly. My field, I work in wildlife conservation, and I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned because we have some precedent here for what happens when we don't have enough boots on the ground, like during the pandemic. And these parks got trashed. And I think what people need to understand is there's no do-overs here, right? If you do not have enough people managing the wildlife, protecting the landscape, if there are not enough rangers on the ground doing that, if a bear dies, he doesn't get a do-over. If a sensitive meadow is driven upon and damaged, that can take decades to restore. So this really has implications for the long-term protection of these places that I'm mystified. If there's one thing that the American public agrees on, it is that national parks and our public lands are America's best idea. And we all enjoy them, whether it be camping, fishing, hiking, wildlife watching. So that this administration is putting them at risk is is really both puzzling and disturbing to me.
A lot of the layoffs at the National Park Service have hit probationary workers, but also some people who have been there for years and were recently promoted. They were also fired. In response to the backlash, the Trump administration said it will consider hiring an additional 3,000 seasonal workers to help fill the gap. Will that get the job done?
I don't think so. And first of all, I have to say, again, this was also, these park rangers are dedicated public servants, and being told they were fired for cause when they weren't. Probationary does not mean you're doing something bad. It just means you could be a 20-year employee that moved into a new position. But here's what folks don't understand is the seasonal hiring should have taken place 2 months ago, right? If you work in parks, Memorial Day to Labor Day is extremely busy. You need to have that infrastructure in place. And although it seems like it's, rescinding that offer and saying we can now hire some seasonal, these parks are scrambling now. If you're someone who was told you weren't hired, you're going to go find another job. These people need to, pay their mortgages, pay their bills. So it really put the Park Service to me in disarray at a time when it was the worst timing. And for what? That's not good business, right? These parks generate money for local economies. And if you're putting the Park Service in struggling to hire to maintain the services at such a critical time, I don't even see how that's good business.
Okay, thank you so much, and best of luck to you and the others who are trying to turn this around, Beth Pratt. We're not done just yet. Coming up, with daylight saving time around the corner, we're going to take a closer look at the history and politics of the practice. Stay with us.
For the millions of school-age children across the country, the state of their schools can have a lasting impact on their health and well-being.
The majority of school districts aren't doing comprehensive, regular water quality testing.
As CO2 levels rise in a space, cognitive function takes a direct decline.
We visit 2 school districts working to create safe and healthy environments for their students.
Watch Exploring Your Health, Curing Our Classrooms, available on the Spectrum News app.
Starting a business is hard. You have to stay connected at all times.
As we've been growing the studio, Spectrum's been there every step of the way. I'm always able to make the phone call that I need. I'm able to shoot that text message or that email. Every vital piece of equipment that we have here uses Spectrum.
Fast, reliable internet, starting at $40 a month, backed by the Spectrum commitment to keep your business connected.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. I love you. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
Food isn't just fuel to live, it's fuel to grow. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater and the arts as a child, which fostered my love for acting. The Feeding America network of food banks helps millions of people put food on the table. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger, and together we can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Visit feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Thanks for sticking with The Big Deal. This Sunday, we will once again enter daylight saving time, where our clocks will spring forward exactly 1 hour. The practice of changing our clocks twice a year is observed in every state except Arizona and Hawaii, and it has been widely debated for decades, with most countries opting out of advancing and winding back their clocks in the spring and in the fall. To understand why America still does this, we have to look back at our history. The practice was first introduced by Benjamin Franklin in 1784, but was not implemented nationwide until World War I as a temporary way to conserve electricity. Congress then brought daylight saving back for 3 years during World War II. A little over 2 decades later, the practice was officially standardized, and it was last updated by Congress in 2005. Now, on the campaign trail last year, President Trump had pledged to eliminate daylight saving time, calling it inconvenient and costly. But as president, he has yet to make a move. He was asked about it again this week.
I assume people would like to have more light later, but some people want to have more light earlier because they don't want to take their kids to school in the dark. And it's a little bit one way, but it's very much a 50-50 issue. And it's something I can do, but a lot of people like it one way, a lot of people like it the other way.
Joining me now to talk more about the politics of daylight saving time is Spectrum News political director Bob Hart. So now, Bob, why did this idea stick past World War I? I mean, does extending daylight actually sort of conserve energy in some way?
Studies have shown that if it does, it's negligible at best. But that hasn't stopped Congress from tinkering with daylight saving time twice, making it earlier. It used to be in April, and then it was moved to late March, and now it's moved to early March. So Congress twice has moved the date back. It really doesn't show that it has that much of an impact, but it does have an impact on people's health and obviously their sleep schedules.
Well, yeah, I want to talk about that because the opponents of daylight saving time say that there are negative health effects that are linked to losing an hour of sleep. Here's how a AAA spokesperson describes it.
But there's also an issue with fatigue. People often are tired behind the wheel, and when it's dark out and the time change itself can interfere with people's circadian rhythms. So people tend to be just a little bit more likely to be drowsy after the time change when they're driving, particularly in the afternoon when they're driving home from work after a long day.
And that's not all. I mean, there's upticks in heart attacks and strokes and so forth. It's a pretty good argument to kind of maybe put this practice aside, right?
Right. We tried as a country for 1 year in 1974 to make daylight saving time permanent. So we didn't spring forward. We January forwarded in 1974, and there was anecdotal evidence that there were more accidents. People were taking their kids to school in the morning. You were having, like in Buffalo, the sun isn't rising until 8:45 in the morning, and so after a year of that, it got repealed, and now we're back to where we are, springing forward and falling back.
Okay, so now Trump is going to need approval from Congress if he does want to make a move. I think the last time Congress touched this was back in 2022. The Sunshine Protection Act was supposed to make daylight saving time permanent, but it stalled in the House. Lawmakers couldn't decide which time to settle on.
Well, and the president is right. There are people saying, no, we should have standard time permanent. The problem is then you would have sunrises in some place. Like I was looking in Boston in the summer, the sunrise would go a little after 4 in the morning. So you can definitely see the negative arguments on both sides. But the one thing that everyone would agree on is falling back and springing forward does disrupt people's lives twice a year.
Okay, we'll see how this all works out and if Donald Trump is going to do anything about it. Thanks very much, Bob. And thank you all for joining us for this episode of The Big Deal. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned to your local Spectrum station.
Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
Our journey towards improving mental health doesn't always present a clear path. Every Thursday on Your Mental Health, we listen to voices across our communities, discussing the challenges of everyday life and presenting accessible resources to guide us along the path to our well-being, providing hope and empowering choices that light the way to a healthier you.
Your Mental Health with Dr. Nicole Clark, Thursdays on Spectrum News Plus, available on all your favorite devices.
It's game time at the arena, and 20,000 fans are looking for a win. With an ultra-high-speed network and seamless Wi-Fi, fans can get in the door fast and share the game's best moments in real time. And with Spectrum Business committed to keeping them connected 100% of the time, they won't miss a second of the action. A secure, reliable connection from Spectrum Business means the fan experience is a guaranteed win.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times powerful. And it affects everything we do. At Spectrum News Plus, our weather experts update you with the information and the context you need so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on Spectrum News Plus, exclusively on Spectrum. And get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app. Spectrum News Plus, local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum